Hello, my friends. This is Dwight from Forest Glory 700 coming back at ya from Ontario, Canada. Anyways, the reason for this video is we need to get rid of daylight savings time. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I don't really see the point of us putting the time ahead 1 hour in the spring and then putting it back an hour in the fall. We're all adults. We can handle more daylight or less daylight, more darkness or less darkness. Let's just move on from this nonsense. The only province in all of Canada where the government, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm giving them props, I don't usually like to give the governments any props, but I'm going to give the Saskatchewan provincial government props because you know why? They don't mess with the time. They leave the time alone. All year round, the time remains the same. They don't push it forward an hour. They don't pull it back an hour. They keep it constantly the same. We need to do the same in Ontario, Canada, because it's getting absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. And it should be across the board, across the nation, because I don't believe it serves any real purpose. And during that time, when we're playing around with time, that hour forward or that hour backward, it confuses a lot of people, and it disrupts a lot of people's lives for that particular time. Case in point, I was working last night, and I work for a transportation company where I transport people from point A to point B and back again. And they had mentioned to us that tonight it was going to be daylight savings time and that the clocks would be advancing 1 hour and that we'd be required to complete our full shift as according to our what we call waybill. I had an issue with that primarily because based on my schedule, I have other commitments outside of my job. So if I'm scheduled to work till 5 and because of daylight savings time going forward an hour in the spring, they're requiring me to finish work after 6. That creates a dilemma. If I have other family commitments where I have to be at home at a specific time, and I'm being required to stay an extra hour, which I understand because you're losing an hour, it still places me in a dilemma because everyone that's getting up that morning are going according to the new time. So I ended up bringing my vehicle into the garage according to the new scheduled time. Technically, I was required to be out an extra hour. Although they didn't ask me, they didn't ask if you'd be willing to do it. It was more of a mandated, you have to do it. And I'm like, well, I have other commitments and I'm going to fulfill this commitment of finishing my usual time, which is basically an hour early, but according to daylight savings time, I'm finishing on time. So I spoke with a staff personnel, and I told him to dock me an hour. And long story short, he made one hell of a headache out of this whole thing. And he called upon me to speak to the supervisor and so forth. And the supervisor explained myself. The supervisor, basically told me, well, in the future, please let us know in advance, whatever, and so forth. But the supervisor in question was actually pretty cool with me because what was done is done. And you have morning crew coming in that's going to still follow their schedule. So you're going to have all these additional buses on the street for that particular hour, which is completely unnecessary as far as I'm concerned. So it created a real issue at work, which as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't have, and I'm probably going to have to speak to my to the manager of the company at some point this week or later in the week and what have you. And of course, they're going to go through their script of telling me that I should have stayed and blah, 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 and this and that. But it still goes back to the fact that I still have other commitments outside of my job. I agreed to work between such and such a time. If the time changes, why is that on me? The time changes. I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm perfectly fine with the time remaining as it is and us continuing on with our lives. But this moving the time forward an hour and backwards an hour twice in a year is completely unnecessary. It confuses people during the time when it occurs because most people, frankly, don't recall until after the fact that the time has been moved forward an hour or backwards an hour. And oftentimes that tends to mess up the work situation for that particular day. So I'm of the greatest opinion that Canadians across the board, we need to get rid of Eastern Daylight Savings Time. No more playing around with the time. Let's just keep it the same so that it avoids confusion. And then I don't have to get into conflict with my employer at work because I was making an argument. They saw it another way, or at least this staff personnel, which is not management, saw it another way, and then it created a conflict between he and I. And it's squashed now as far as I'm concerned, but it was just a little irritating because he accused me of playing games. And I'm like, no, I have other commitments outside of my job. Them changing the time is not a game that I'm playing. I'm still obligated to follow through with whatever commitments I have at a specified time. And if that time changes, I'm still required to meet those commitments that are outside of my workplace. Anyways, this is Dwight from Forest Glory, just throwing out some ramblings at you. We got to get rid of daylight savings time. Let's keep the time the same. Take care. Be blessed. Goodbye.